Hey everyone, so in this video we are going to take a look at the new Unity Input Manager. So I am using version 2020.1. I believe this was originally implemented for 2019 to 0.3, but we're going to use a slightly newer version. So even though you're using 2020.1, it is not installed by default. So quick rant, I don't know why Unity insists on fragmenting their development environment like this, but for whatever reason, you have to install all these different packages depending on what you're looking for. So you'd go up to Window, Package Manager, and then you would go to Unity Registry. And this is in alphabetical order, so Input System. And then these are samples, but you can't import them until you've installed this. We click on Install. You might want to skip ahead a few seconds. And then I believe we get an advisory that says we have to restart. Yes, it just showed up now. So we'll restart and then pick up where we left off. And we're back. So the next step, right-click in the asset area, create, and we create an input actions object. And let's call this player controls. Okay. And now what we do, we double click to open that object. And this is a new window that never existed before prior to adding the new input system. And this is how you can just visually make a mapping. So action map, we'll call this player movement. And this action we will rename to just movement. And for some reason, the information I was looking at concerning how to use these, so how to use the new input system, for some reason skipped any mention of doing anything over here. So what you need to do for the controller, if you're using the analog stick, you're going to choose value. And rather than a button, we want to use any. And then what will happen is the controller will be accessible over here. So if we expand this, you can see there's no bindings for movement. And then for path, you just click on this. You choose Gamepad, and then you choose left stick. For some reason, if you don't select these, left stick would be grayed out and you can't select it. I don't know why, and none of the tutorials seem to refer to it either. So that was something I had to dig up on my own. Anyways, so once you've done this, you've created this mapping to a specific action that you want. Now, it doesn't actually do movement. This is just what you're going to use it for, okay? So you're going to click on Save Asset. You're going to generate C# script. You're going to click on Apply. And then you're going to close this window. So what happened is you just took that player control object and you dynamically created a script which you're going to do absolutely nothing with. Unity will utilize it. You don't have to do anything with it though. Okay, so next step, we need an object that is going to be moved around. So game object, 3D object, cube. Let's go ahead and add component physics. You could use a character controller. In fact, for your games, you probably want to, but we just want to look at the mapping at the moment and get the basic handle of using the input. So we'll just choose a rigid body. We'll get rid of gravity, and then we're going to add a script to this. Right click, create C#, and we'll call this move cube. And we'll take move cube and we'll put it onto the object. So there we go, move cube, and we'll open that up. Next, we need to add a namespace. Again, part of my mini rant. I don't know why Unity doesn't have this installed by default. Again, input is an essential part of interaction, so Anyway, so now you need to add Unity engine dot input system. We get rid of start. We're not going to use that. What we're going to do, we're going to create an instance of that player control. So that's not an arbitrary word. That is specifically referring to player controls. Okay. And we'll just call it controls. And then actually we need more spaces. We will now do void, and we will do awake, and we'll create a new instance of that. So controls equals new player controls. So now, rather than having to address this, we can just do controls dot whatever. Okay. You can get rid of that. That's a remark statement. Save that. And let's go ahead and add a vector 2. So vector 2, and we will call this, we'll just call this move. So it's going to capture X and Y. So basically the left, the horizontal and the vertical move on the left analog stick. Now the next two lines I'm just going to paste. That way I don't make the video too long because there's a lot of typing and I don't want to make a mistake. So basically what we're doing is we're drilling down to that mapping that we're just looking at, because if you recall correctly, we said controls is player controls. Okay, that was the name of the mapping object. And then within that mapping object, we created the player movement and then the movement action. Now this is saying if it's performed, we're going to use the context, don't worry too much about that, and put it into the move variable that we just created. Okay, so even though this says equals or greater than, it actually isn't. It's not comparing a value. It's basically take the context, take that value, and put it into this variable. And I'm not sure why they didn't use the pipe, because to the best of my knowledge, that's what the pipe means. So that's the symbol that is next to the enter key with the backslash. If you hold shift and you press that, we'll just do this over here. That's the pipe symbol. And that's, to best knowledge, what the pipe means. It means what's on the left gets put into the right. So for whatever reason, they use this. So it's not an equation. It's saying take what's in here, put it into move, and then context dot read value vector 2. So it's reading that vector 2. Now this is when we let go of the controller. So controls dot player movement, movement canceled. So this is not a really great explanation that I just gave you, but for what it's worth, copy and paste it and it will work. I wish I could give you a better explanation. Again, I have a visceral dislike for what Unity has done with this, but at least part of this should make sense, that you're drilling down through the names you created. You're drilling down through, if we open this up, you'll see it matches. So player movement, movement, movement. Has it been performed or has it been canceled? What's the context? Take that and put it into the move variable. So again, hope that's clear enough. And like I said, Unity has taken something very simple and made it more convoluted than absolutely necessary, in my opinion. And a little bit more copy and paste from the Notepad doc I've been working on today. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take this vector 2, and as a reminder, vector 2 is x and y, and we're going to convert it to a vector 3. The reason for that is because we don't want the up or forward press on the left analog stick to make you move up in the air, because vector 2 is x and y, okay? We don't want you to move along y, we want you to move along z. So what we need to do, we are going to take that vector 2 and put it into a vector 3. So we're saying vector 3, and we're just going to call it m, you could call it whatever you want, is equal to a new vector 3, and here's the vector 2 move, and we're pulling out that x and we'll multiply it by 5 so it's not slow. So we're saying take the vector 2x and put it into the vector 3x. So x will go into x. Pretty straightforward. But we don't want the y value to go into the y value of the vector 3. So we don't want the y from vector 2 to go into the y from vector 3. We're going to set y to 0, at least for the left analog stick. Instead, we're going to apply that value to z, because again, if you're pressing forward or up, you're pressing down or back on the left analog stick, you would expect your character to move horizontally on the surface, not up and down. So you're taking the vector 2y and putting it into the vector 3z. So hopefully I did a better job explaining that than I did these two lines. And then it's just a matter of taking this variable that you just declared and you're applying it to the rigid body. So get component, rigid body, velocity, this. So again, copy and paste from my Notepad doc. On enable, on disable. So again, you're just drilling down through that map. You're going from controls to player movement to enable. And again, controls refers to the player controls object. So the player controls object and then the mapping named. Actually, it stops at player movement. Sorry, so it's player controls and then player movement. So that's it says that entire mapping is enabled or that entire mapping is disabled. And again, this is just maintenance. You have to put it here. It's that simple. So hopefully that was clear, and we will run this now. And the last thing after this would be rotation. So let's see if I have missed anything. There we go. So that's left and right. And now if I press up and down on the controller, it's forward and back. Now, a good thing about this is it uses collisions, as you can see. Because one of the problems with some of the tutorials I was looking at and some of the documentation, it was using transform.translate, and this is not meant to be a criticism of them. It did indeed move the block, but the problem with doing transform is you're actually taking the block and you're moving it rather than adding velocity. In other words, collision detection is ignored. So there may be a way to adjust it later, but I'd rather have something that scales from the get-go. So I believe that using velocity, you could probably use force too, depending on how you can do add force. Well, you can do that. You just have to be careful because sometimes it may not, it may apply in a natural way and what you're trying to do may not be. Maybe you want them to accelerate faster or slower, and then the add force may not be best for you. So velocity is instantaneous. So there's no buildup. You instantly are moving at that velocity, whereas force, there would be an acceleration and deceleration. So the only thing left is rotation, so let's take a crack at that. So let's go back to our player controls, and it's just rinse and repeat. It'll still be part of player movement, but we'll click on the plus for a new action. We'll call this rotate. And I'll show you what I was talking about earlier. We'll leave this as action type button. So if I click on no bindings, because there is not a binding yet, and I choose a path, and I choose Gamepad, as you can see, it's grayed out. I actually can't select it. So you change this to value, change this to any, go back to select a binding, and there, now you can select it. So we'll actually choose right stick for rotation, and then we save the asset, and we will close this. And now over to the script. So what we did, so we added another vector 2. Now remember, this is basically rinse and repeat. So we captured the vector 2 move and then applied it. So now we're going to do the vector 2 for rotation. Okay. So vector 2, we're going to use ROT for rotation. And then here is the new coding. It's almost identical. And again, I didn't want to type this out because I didn't want to make any mistakes. And I am, again, trying to contain my visceral dislike for this process. So controls, player movement, but now it's rotate. So I'm hoping you're seeing that pattern, that you're drilling down into, it's mapping. You're drilling down into the exact mapping that you want. This time it's rotate. Was it perform? Same kind of thing. You're taking that value, putting into a context, but this time it's this new variable. So you can see the difference. You can see rather than movement, it's rotate. Rather than the move variable, it's the rotate variable. Okay? And again, you are performing it or canceling it. In the update section, we're just applying that to the rotation. And then that is about it. Now, the only thing is the X and the Z coordinate and the X coordinate, okay? Or should I say vectors? When you're moving, since it's not coordinates, it's motion. When you're moving, it's really ignoring the facing. So that is something that we could work on in a more advanced one. Again, this was about being able to capture the values from the controller and apply it to the objects in the scene. We can get to a more cleaner version in a later video. I just wanted to make sure that what I demonstrated would be mindful of, say, collision detection and things like that. So as you can see, it's just get component, transform, rotate. So again, you're just drilling down through the the components, excuse me. So if you click on cube, you're saying which component? Well, the transform component. Okay. So get component, transform, and then this time we're going to affect the rotation, and then it's a vector 3, and up, that is a pre-existing command. That's not anything I came up with, so it's not like it's a variable that I created. And it's being multiplied by rotation.x, so that is the variable we created. And again, we're pulling out that x coordinate, and we're multiplying it by 0.2f. So in other words, we only want 20% of it to be applied to rotation. So if we save that, you'll see that it will rotate. Now, even though it's up, okay, even though it's saying up, it's going to rotate on the y-axis. So in other words, it's as if it is rotating like around a pole or something. So if I use the right analog control, see, rotating, rotating, and that's all the way. So it rotates at a decent speed, depending on what you're trying to do. Now, here's what I was saying. So say I rotate like that, and I press forward on the controller. I'm still moving along the z-axis. So the horizontal movement does ignore whatever direction you're facing in. Now, that actually would be useful for some games because that would be known as strafing. So say I'm facing forward, I'm facing towards the horizon, and I'm moving left and right. Well, that's strafing. Okay, so it's not that this is an invalid control scheme, it's just a very specific one. So whereas what we'd probably want is that if I'm rotated like that and I press forward, I'd actually like move in that direction. Only reason why I moved in that direction is because I was moving left and forward. If I move forward, it just goes that. So it currently ignores what direction you're facing in, but again, so this would be more of a strafing model rather than a third or first person move in the direction that you're facing. So we can always look at that in a more advanced version, but I think that this should be a good place to stop because now you've seen the new input system, you've seen how to take the input from the controller and the left and right analog stick specifically and apply it to movement and rotation. And like I said, you can just thumbnail that into so as that the movement is mindful of moving forward. Okay, and that change would probably be made here because this is the forward velocity. So this would probably be changed. You would probably have to do something similar to this where it would be forward multiplied by the variables, that kind of thing. But I don't want to speculate too much because I don't want to send you in the wrong direction, but you would change the velocity to be mindful of what direction you're facing in. So I think that should do it for this video. I really hope that you found this helpful, and I hope you found it a lot less frustrating than I did. And again, my apologies. I typically try not to complain, but I really do think Unity has made this more complicated than absolutely necessary. And hopefully this has been helpful, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And if you watch the Minecraft series I'm doing right now as far as recreating a voxel Minecraft type game, I'm going to use a similar control structure, which is the reason why I made this video. That way I can go through it much more quicker in that video, or else that next video would take forever. So anyways, please have a good day.